I know a lot of people are excited for Aventurine's release in Honkai Star Rail, especially because of the recent main story quest, but we do also have another limited sustain that is currently on banner right now, being Luocha. And because both of them are going to be very good for a lot of players, it is forcing players to decide whether Luocha or Aventurine will be the better character to pull for on their account. So today, I want to look at Aventurine and Luocha's kits and the value that they can give you in different situations based on what characters and what teams you're running, to see which one is going to be the most valuable for you to pull on your account. So starting out with the analyzing each of their kits, starting with Aventurine here. So while we don't have the specifics of his kit, we do have some information about it, both from the 2.1 livestream, and we were also able to test his kit out during the 2.1 main story quest. While we weren't able to actually look at the multipliers or anything, we were able to use it and see some interactions depending on different teams that we use it with and whatnot. So from everything we know so far, we do know he's a preservation character, and he is going to focus on creating shields, like basically every preservation besides Fu Xuan. So you're going to use his skill to apply his shield to the entire team, and this is a stackable shield, which means that if you use his skill again while your allies have the shield, he will be able to further increase the durability of the shield, which is very good and a very nice thing in comparison to some of the other shielders. Then, unlike the other preservations as well, Aventurine is also able to improve the durability of a shield through his follow-up attack. And this is really good because every other shielder currently, I believe, only has one main way to put their shield up. With March 7th and Fire Trailblazer, it's with their skill, which a part is with his ultimate only. But Aventurine does have the second way, which is through his follow-up attack. Now, because we haven't seen the specifics of his kit yet, we are not sure if this is just part of his talent or if it's part of a major trace. But upon seeing the the gameplay during the main story quest, we are able to see that that when his follow-up attack triggers, you are able to get some extra shield stacked onto your allies, which is very nice. And to activate his follow-up attack, he needs to get 7 stacks of blind bet, and you do have a few ways you can gain these stacks for him. So you'll gain 1 stack of blind bet whenever an ally does a follow-up attack, and you can also gain a stack whenever any ally that has Aventurine shield gets hit. So it's just going to be really consistent overall because of that, since the shields are going to be on all allies anyway. So, depending on how many enemies, you could get the blind bet stack very fast that way. Plus, as a part of Aventurine's ultimate, you'll get a random amount of blind bet stacks, and these stacks can actually overflow beyond the maximum of 7, which means that, let's say, for example, you use his ultimate and you get up to 10 stacks, right? So it'll use the 7 to do the follow-up attack, and then you'll be sitting at 3 out of 7 for the next follow-up attack. So you should be able to use that pretty often, and that'll just help you keep those shields up. So I think that's going to be very consistent overall. And on the topic of the ultimate, it also is able to place a debuff on a single enemy, and that will increase the amount of crit damage they take, which does give him some extra value alongside crit DPSs, which is a lot of the DPSs in the game. So definitely a very solid buff for him as well. And then lastly, when it comes to his kit, his technique is able to give one of 3 random defense buffs to the entire team for a set duration at the start of battle. And pairing all this together with how consistent his shields are and his follow-up attack being able to provide some extra damage and further improve his shields, he's not only going to be an amazing sustain on pretty much any team, but I do think he's going to have some very strong synergy when it comes to follow-up comps. If you're using a comp with Dr. Ratio and Topaz especially, because I do think that is the best follow-up comp in the game right now, they are going to benefit a lot from Aventurine, considering that Aventurine's follow-up damage, is just a little bit extra there, plus also it will be buffed by Topaz as well. So I do think if you are running those characters, then Aventurine could be very valuable for you as well. So now to move on into Luocha, I do think it's important to note that when he released, it was prior to when Hoyoverse started to give a lot of these sustainers some extra utility outside of just keeping the team alive. And I think this is important to note because it feels like, at least to me, that so many people are using this as a reason to call older sustains bad. When I would, like, while the newer ones are better, absolutely, when it comes to like utility and whatnot, the point of a sustainer, you know, should first and foremost be to keep the team alive. And because of that, sustainers that were, you know, released, you know, pre-Fu Xuan still have a lot of value, and Luocha is definitely one of them. So let's see, yeah, getting into his kit here, I do think that the best part about Luocha's kit is that he is very SP positive and very SP efficient. And with that, his healing is also very consistent as well, because a lot of sustains are going to have to use their skill often to heal, or, you know, just use their skill to, you know, activate their sustain in one way or another. But for Luocha, he has two very powerful abilities for healing through his skill and his talent. So while on the, you know, surface level, his skill is just a single target heal that can also cleanse, he does also have a part of his skill which will allow it to activate every 2 turns to heal an ally that has below half health. And because of how, you know, consistent that can be, because it's an automatic activation, unless you're getting like hit with insane AoE attacks that you can't even, like, you know, single heal for that, this is going to be very consistent for his healing. And you're gonna, and with the amount that he is healing as well with his multipliers, you pretty much will be back to full in any kind of situation, which is really good. And because it's automatic, you don't have to use the skill points at all, so that really does help him be very SP positive. Then for his talent allows him to hold 2 stacks of Abyss Flower, and he gains these stacks through using his skill and ultimate, and that does also apply to his automatic skill. It will give the stack of Abyss Flower. And once he reaches 2 stacks, he'll use those stacks to deploy a field that will basically allow you to do a kind of, it's not exactly lifesteal, but, you know, it kind of is, where you whenever you attack an enemy, you're able to heal from it. And then one of his major traces makes it so that the when you attack an enemy with when the field is up, all of your allies will also heal a bit smaller of an amount, but it still is very good to get some extra damage, get some extra healing off, I mean, while you're doing your damage. So yeah, it is also important to talk about his technique as well, because when it comes to the start of battle, because you might be thinking, oh, you know, you don't have much healing at the start of battle then, because you need to get the field up. But when it comes to Luocha's technique, he is able to automatically start up his field at the start of battle, which also makes him just really consistent, especially in that endgame content, you know, Memory of Chaos, Golden Gears, you know, that kind of stuff. I wouldn't really say Pure Fiction, because a lot of the time you're not running a sustain in Pure Fiction, but it is also, you know, worth noting that. So putting all this together, you know, with his field, his auto healing, and then also his ultimate's ability to remove a debuff from an enemy, to remove a buff even from the enemies, is going to be a very solid, you know, combination to not only have some interesting utility to be able to remove buffs, that makes it a lot easier to fight some of those annoying enemies like the Sanctus Medicus enemies with the revive buff. Yeah, it just ultimately will make those fights a lot easier, and then also just with his healing, very consistently will keep you alive, and he pretty much won't ever have to use skill points. It's very rarely you'll have to use skill points with Luocha when, you know, running him properly. So now that we looked at both of their kits and, you know, did like a surface level kind of analysis for their value, now let's look back to the main question of the video. Should you pull for Aventurine or Luocha? Now, I think if you're just looking for a short answer, Aventurine is likely going to perform better as a sustain than Luocha, because you know, both of them are going to be very consistent, but I do think that Aventurine does offer a bit more utility. But I feel like that answer doesn't do it that much justice, because there are situations where I might actually recommend Luocha over Aventurine. So to start out with Aventurine, you know, the best situations versus like worst situations for him, I do think that, as I said, if you're using follow-up attack comps, you know, Topaz, Ratio, well, pretty much any team with Topaz involved, because she is able to boost follow-up attack damage through her Proof of Debt. I do think that those comps will have an insane amount of value when pulling for Aventurine. just because you're going to get some extra damage with this follow-up attack, and the follow-up attacks from your allies are also going to increase his blind bet stack. So it really does work well together there. But when it comes to, I think, the situation where you're probably getting the least value from Aventurine is going to be if you're running a dot team, because one of Aventurine's like most important benefits outside of his sustain is the extra crit damage debuff that he applies to an enemy on his ultimate. But because damage over time is not able to crit, you're not getting as much value from that when running Aventurine on those teams. So if you're mainly like a dot team main and you're looking for a sustain that can benefit them, Aventurine might not be as good of a pull for you. You're probably better off using someone like Gallagher maybe for the break, or waiting for Huo to come back. But outside of that though, I do think just in general, as long as you're running a crit DPS, there is definitely value to be had from pulling for Aventurine. So now moving on to Luocha for his value, I do think that his value ends up being a lot more consistent across the game, regardless of whether you're running like follow-up team, dot team, standard crit DPS team, like hyper carry. I do think that Luocha ends up being so consistent just because of his SP efficiency, but I do also think that with specific DPSs, the ones that use a ridiculous amount of skill points, like Imbibitor, Lune, and Xingque, that Luocha is actually a lot more valuable than some other sustains, because those DPSs, like Imbibitor, Lune, you're gonna need 3 skill points to use his max enhanced basic attack. For Xingque, it's RNG based. Sometimes you need 1 skill point, sometimes you need like 5, right? So having Luocha be a character that really doesn't take any skill points unless you're in a really awful and annoying situation, you are going to be able to funnel more skill points into those DPSs and get more damage from them, which is just more valuable for you in general. So I do think if you're looking for a team with those 2 characters specifically, but if there's any other character where you're using a lot of skill points, I singled out Imbibitor and Xingque just because they use the most out of any character at a single time. So it is, I think it is very valuable to have a character like Luocha alongside them so that they can have more skill points available to get the most out of their kits. But when it comes to just other comps besides that, I don't think Luocha particularly has any comps where he is like the worst option kind of thing. But I think it really just depends on what you're looking for your account, because if you are looking for, I think, a character that is a little bit more comfortable, Luocha will probably be your character, because you do have the auto healing, you have the field, and you'll pretty much just be able to keep your team alive in a lot of situations there. But yeah, overall, at the end of the day, I think that pulling for either Aventurine or Luocha in both any kind of situation is going to be really good for your account. And again, it just depends on if you have specific niches on your account that will maybe benefit from having Aventurine a little bit more, like those follow-up teams, or if you're running those SP heavy DPS characters, maybe Luocha is just going to be a better pick for you. But yeah, overall, I do think that neither one of them are going to be a bad pick. So let me know down in the comments below if you are going to be pulling. Let me know if you're going to be going for Aventurine or Luocha. I'm personally going to be skipping, waiting for 2.2. But yeah, with that, everyone, I'm going to end it off here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you all next time.